working in a rural area like this, I mean, we were sharing some personal things this morning, and it is getting painful. Okay, tomorrow we're all somewhere else, and in the city or even in a large town, you will have the same kind of organized intimacy and normal not knowing each other in a rural community. Let's say here in Austin, people know each other, some ones for generations and other are newest, and there's always one or two families who are the boss.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you work with this type of communities?
So I suppose I start from the premise that in a way everybody wants to find a point of connection with each other, and sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes we might do stuff that can be more anonymous, so you don't have to leave your name, but actually also, like I did this grandmothers project that I was speaking about yesterday, which was trying to get together different grandmothers in 3 different villages together to make a project about their lives and their experiences. And so I think sometimes in a rural context it's like, it reminds me in a neighbourhood I was speaking yesterday in where we lived, it's that actually everybody knows each other in a small neighbourhood as well. So it's about creating a slightly neutral space that perhaps an artist is facilitating, that can enable that people to connect with each other out of the maybe hierarchies that sometimes exist in a rural context, where maybe one family does have a huge amount of power, or people feel like, I can't quite say that because is that okay to say, because are we allowed to say that? Whereas I think sometimes
you can't forget, they know it's still tomorrow.
They know it, but I think that's the same in a street, in a neighbourhood, in a workplace. You know, that there's something around when we come in as artists and create a space that's sensitive and neutral and holding, that people can almost take off slightly that role and then see each other and themselves differently, so it loosens it a bit, I found. But a lot of it's about trust that we would build up with people as well. So my other principle is around let curiosity be your guide. So I think that people will genuinely really know if you're not really interested in dialogue and exploration and open-ended. It's like people can smell it. You know, if someone stops you in the street and says it and you go, have you already decided? You know, I think you've probably, are you really consulting me? Or are you really asking me? And it amazes me how people think people are stupid. You know, people who are consulting people tend to think that if they say, here's my consultation, here's my questionnaire, I've already decided, but you won't be able to tell. And I think people are so clever that they know, am I really interested in you? You know, or have I decided? Am I really, as an artist, am I really going to be open to what material comes in, or am I really trying to steer something that I want? So there's something around, I would say, you know, it's not that we can't do projects or things where we don't decide, but I'm only collecting stories about cats or something, you know. I mean, but it's then about being, that's my curiosity, so I'm being honest about that. I'm not going to pretend that, just tell me any story about an animal, but if you've got one about a cat, that would be good. You know, it's like, there's something sort of to be genuine with your own curiosity. Because I think that it's a challenge for people to participate, to trust, to really trust that their own point of view is really valued. And I think we're in a society where so much people's individual points of view are not really valued and given space, and so it feels like it's very fragile and powerful to be able to ask people genuinely, what do you think? And then when I do either creative projects, which is using people's stories, or consultation, then I have to work really hard to make sure that I can be clear, where is that contribution going to go? Or to be honest, to say, I don't know here, but we're asking. So there's something about your own curiosity. I don't know if other people have found that, like, that balance between, to being genuine, really. You know, how much are we genuinely interested in the dialogue between people? So that's another This was a project we did in the streets. It was a project we were commissioned to do to ask about what do you think you need to age well in one of the small towns where we live, which has got the oldest population in the whole of the country, which is where we live. It's where the rest of England will be in 30 years' time. And so this was some consultation we did for a very, very big £6 million funding that we got, not all for the arts, that we got in order to improve ageing. And we worked with a lot of people to design a way to ask people around ageing. This was a kit that we designed. It's like a toolkit, and we designed this house where there was a series of questions that we asked, and we worked with 100 volunteers who each had 10 of these houses in their kit, in their bag, and they went around 10 people that they knew, and in their kit there was a tea bag, and you had some of these, so they could go and have a cup of tea and ask people to fill in these questions on these houses. And everyone really liked the fact that it wasn't just a bit of paper in the house. And then we did an exhibition with all of the houses and invited people who had taken part in these houses through the toolkit and on the street when we met them to come to like a whole visioning session. And sometimes when we say bring people together to say let's vision what should happen, the people who are already confident might go to those events, and I'm interested in how can we get people who aren't already going to go. And this was one method, that by meeting people on the street and chatting to people, making that contact where they are, then people realise, oh actually maybe someone is really interested in what I've got to say. And then the next thing when we said come to a big visioning event, there's a meal and we can together look at these and take the next step, then a lot of people came who wouldn't usually come. Yeah. So you've seen this a bit today, that for me there's a key principle around offering more than one way in. This is what you reflected on this morning. Have multiple entry points, so that people with different, you spoke about it, okay, so I started here, or someone else maybe just the chalkboard, or it's like, if there's one entry point and the person doesn't want to do that, then that's it, it's game over. Whereas if there's 5 or 6 ways that people can join in, and then for me, I often spend a lot of time going, how am I making the offer to join in? Where am I doing it? For who am I doing it? And how creative can I be? And I found that quite often we might stand in the street, so this was a mobile, and you can see it just grew over time, and we went to the same places, and it's like a living room. And actually somebody walking along the road with their shopping and they see this, and it's the kind of double take that just slightly interrupts it, and then in a way somebody's there and someone might smile and what is this, and then we're into that conversation, and then people are curious, So this offering more than one way in. This is, I was showing yesterday, this is a mobile vehicle that I was part of creating, which has got a stove at the back, and it was commissioned by a kind of parks and countryside, so it could go and again engage and reach and connect with people. It's called the Shed on Wheels. It used to be a milk float, so it goes very, very slowly. So, and then the last principle, this is a mobile, for me the last principle is about working out how to position yourself as a facilitator. So the space between me as an artist and facilitator and a participant, and this space in between is the really rich space. Sorry, you saw that before and I didn't have more time. While we're waiting, any other things people want to
How
discuss?
much time, if so, do you use on documenting, seeing the process afterwards? It's not like you just, when it's over, you throw down all the notes from people and throw them out?
That's what I'm going to say to all of you, that you want to take your precious things back when you finish, and take them back. That we would often, we'll document them, photograph them, type them up, they become a bit like an archive. Quite often, like when we were doing this project, behind the scenes, because it was for a very big bid, we had somebody who was translating this into much more quantitative data, looking at the trends, analysing this information. This is the first time I'd worked, with someone at the side kind of going, okay, what's coming out, what are the themes that are coming out, and they were analysing those. Or if I'm working with an architect or a master planner, then they'll be looking at some of the drawings or some of the possibilities. And then quite often I'm also involved in, like, if it's a consultation rather than a creative project where I'm making a show or a performance or an exhibition, then all that materials becomes like verbatim material that we use, or we might use it in the visuals or in the stories that actors or people are using. If it's more in consultation, then also I often do a second stage, which is where I would invite people who've been involved in this first stage to then act on behalf of the whole community. That's the harder bit. Like, it's easy for me to say this, but how do you start to filter this down so that you can begin to make decisions? And often I will ask people to act on behalf of other people to read what they've seen. So often we might do something out in the street, and then all that material we bring into another venue and gather people together for that. So I've got, there's quite a lot of material in hard to.
You touched a little bit on it before by saying that you can have some sleepless nights. I want to ask if you have any methods of dealing with, because I do similar work, and taking all these people in and having all this responsibility is super intense.
It is intense, and I think that some of it's around how, when I'm holding space, having supervision is important. I have work supervision. Like if I was, a drama therapist or something, you'd have supervision. So often, the last few years, and I put that in for artists that I'm working with. So there's a supervisor outside of all of this where you can take that. I think that's important in that work. And also, what I've been learning is it's also about knowing how to sit back into that. I can't control fully what's going to happen. All I can know is that in that moment I'm being really present and have authenticity in the moment of interaction with somebody, and that I'm creating for them an enriching experience. And actually after that, to some extent, that's their lives, and beyond that, I think, really. So these are my last two. So there's something about co-authoring, and how do you create non-hierarchical frames or structures where all contributions are treated equally. So that's what I was saying about the 8-year-old boy, or or somebody who's lived here all their life, or somebody new who's arrived. And that can be done through some of the form, everyone has a similar space, or just in that attitude to valuing everybody's contributions is important. And I think also, I used to, for 12 years I was a theatre maker, and I was really making sort of total theatre, where the lights come on here, I'm working with a designer, and here, and I'm crafting that whole experience for the audience. And in a way now my craft is more on what's the question or what's the frame, and that the outcome is different. I'm not attached to that. It's a shift. So for me it's about not being attached to a very particular outcome. And then we talked about that, I don't expect people to come to me, and really that exploration of how am I as a facilitator, how can I let go, how can I hold space, how can I go to where people are at. This is a project we did in a greenhouse with an environment agency and some local farmers and residents, and it was talking about climate change and the impact on them. And they kept diaries over a month. We invited them to keep a diary over a month, and then we made an installation in a greenhouse, and we shared their stories. And then really the whole idea was that there was an environment agency locally who was having to make quite difficult decisions about the landscape. This was in a rural context, and they wanted some residents to consult. And so we got a commission to really take people on a bit of a journey, and they kept diaries, and they came and saw the installation, and then there was a room where we were talking about the future, like what would a future diary be. And then at the end of that, we had a group of people who'd gone on an experience who were then much more ready to be able to talk about the wider issues of their area, because they'd had a personal process in it. So for me, this layer between self, relationship, wider world and community is important. And often we expect people to go straight into the wider community thing, like what do you think? And actually it's like how am I, who am I in this time? What's my sense of myself? Who am I in relationship with my friends, my family in that close way? And then who am I in relationship to the wider community and the wider world? And then I spoke about this space between, where the audience and the participant, so I can be a witness and a participant at the same time. I use that a lot, which means that it's not like one person's an expert and someone's passive. There's a huge amount of passivity, and how do we create people who feel that they can be active? And I think we need to go backwards and forwards, and I look and we look together, and then I'm doing it. These are through our, some of the outcomes that have evolved through some of the work and the creative projects that we do. Yeah, that's a little bit about that in there. And I like this one. Yeah. Is there any last points or any other last questions or anything?
Are you doing with a team of people, or who's?
So I'm the creative director of a company, yeah, and then I have 3 or 4 associates who I work very closely with. Lucy Neal, who was in that film, who's written this book that I would really recommend, which is called Playing for Time, Making Art as if the world mattered. It's a book. Yeah, you know Lucy? Yeah?
Yes, it was last year on a thing we were in together.
Yeah, so Lucy has created a book with about 64 artists, mostly UK based, who are making art kind of out of the art context mostly, and who are taking in broad this sort of wider ecological times that we're living in, and re-looking at the role of the artist. So Lucy is an associate that I work with, and then we also have 2 other associates, one person, Anne-Marie, who does a lot of focus on food-based projects, and Shelley Castle's another associate who does a lot of heritage projects. So we're a kind of creative lead, and then we have a number of artists that we work with as well. Yeah, on a freelance basis. We're not a huge company, but we have people that we've been working with for a while on that basis. And it's always a balance between the projects that are more, that we might lead on, that we might get funding for, which are perhaps more artist-led projects. Always about working with people, but they maybe take maybe more lateral, or like my grandmother's project. I probably wouldn't have been commissioned to do that by a health authority or something, but that was something that I really wanted to do because I've become a grandma. So in a way, sometimes the artist-led projects become like a lab space to be able to then get the kind of more commissioned work that we might get from a non-arts context, health context, regeneration agencies, and because we've moved more rurally in just only in the last 5 years, then more of our work is going into that, more looking in that area as well, different partners. So.
Ja. Der er en, der kan oversætte for mig. Det kan godt være, at der er blevet svaret på det. De store sorte tavler, hvor folk skrev et eller andet. Når de tavler, de er fyldt op, bliver det så visket ud, bliver det stående. Det er vigtigt for mig.
De gaver et arkiv, hvor de skriver det ned i og gemmer det. Eller tager billeder af det, og så laver et arkiv, hvor de ligesom har det.
Men tænker du undervejs i processen? Eller?
Ja, altså bliver de fyldt helt ud, de tavler der. Eller hvordan vil folk føle det, når de har skrevet noget, så de bliver visket ud igen, så er det jo ikke vigtigt mere. Altså,
The black notes, when people write up, if it's filled up during the process, what do you do? Do you wipe something out, or?
Sometimes, like we had a very one shot we did where we had a very big blackboard, but lots of people came into the shop. Like once a week, we changed the question, photograph it, so we put up the result on a wall, and then we change it. Or sometimes we change it every day, so people will be like, "Oh, what's the question today?"
But they still see that what they left the day before is still there.
Yeah. They have it as a as a photograph.
Do you make advertisements for your shop? Like
We have like a shop flyer, or we'll have a sign on the shop. So as well as having like the shop that people drop in, then we'll also do more of the usual publicity you might do for any event. So we'd have a flyer with the opening hours on it, come in on this time, or we'd send it through all the local community networks, or sometimes we'd say if a community group wants to come to the shop, so they're bringing them as an activity, that we would maybe close the shop because it's a closed sort of workshop, or so it can just depend on what that is really. Or you saw that there was a group of school kids, that was a school visit, that kind of came to the shop as a school visit. We can adapt it really. And then this year, our last thing is that we've just got this funding. I'm a bit scared because it's a big project, which is that we're going to make a mobile arts, culture, learning space, a bit like a shop, with 5 different communities, and it's going to be like a microcosm of a kind of sustainability project really, so that each of the 5 communities would be trying to work with us to physically make this space, but through it they would be exploring global issues really. So when we're looking at materials and water and energy and food, each of the group will be coming up against how do we make decisions around that, but we're trying to do it in a co-design way. So we're trying to do it sort of with 5 different communities and with people with old skills and new skills. So we're doing that over the next 18 months, and then we'll have a mobile. I want it to be amphibious, so it can go on water and sea. It might be mountain. This is my vision. So then we'll have this space that can tour. So maybe we'll come to Denmark or anywhere else with it. But that's the idea, that we're going to make that.
Yeah, then you go amphibious across the North Sea. Will do.
Maybe not that much, but just done some river. So yeah, we're doing that with people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And please take your personal
Yeah, and please,
behind.
if everybody can take a chair and bring it to the information, then when you actually come in, it'd be great to have you. There's a flip and stone.
Yeah, it's great. It's lovely.
You have the website.
most of the